Now, I'm really excited about this one today. So, bird-snouted duck-like. That's the rough translation of, get ready, the ornithorhynchus, or as we know it, the platypus. Now, for you scientists out there, I know I more than likely pronounced the scientific name horribly wrong. But seriously, there's really nothing new there. I'm sure you've listened before. In today's episode, Dr. Tahneal Hawke joins me. She's a conservation biologist and researcher, and roughly for the last 10 years, she's been monitoring the wild platypus. Now, I just think these guys are so really cool. It's the perfect job for what seems to be the most imperfect put-together animals. They're egg-laying mammals, and that duckbill, it's actually soft. The males, they have spurs on their legs that are connected to venom glands. And under a UV light, they glow. Yep, they actually glow. And feeding their young, wait till you hear. It's a weird thing. It's a really bizarre thing, trust me. Now here's another crazy thing. They really look a lot bigger in all those pictures we always see. They're actually just a little over a foot long, and they only weigh about 1.5 pounds. Tahneal, she's cool. Really cool. Platypus? They're cool. Really cool. And by the way, the First Nations people have lots of names for these guys. One of my favorites, Boonabura. Needless to say, this is a really cool episode. Am I being redundant? So, get ready. And as the modern myth says, God had leftover parts and made a platypus. And in this episode, it's going to make your day.
For real, 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 for real. Got a bunch of furry friends and I love them all the same. I'm an animal lover, veterinarian is the name. Let's share some pet stories from heartwarming to strange, losses and gains, from wacky to insane. For real. You're now tuned in to For Real with your host, Mark Kyle.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to the For Real Podcast. Today I have a huge treat for you today. It's going to be a fun one. It's been we've been trying to coordinate this for a while. She's been working and doing things, and I've just been playing around. But today, everybody, please welcome Dr. Tahneal Hawke. Tahneal, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Well, this is an exciting one for me, and I know that people that are, if they're seeing it, they already have seen the social media with the stuff out there and all that kind of stuff. And they're such a fascinating animal. But before we get in there, I want to talk about you because you're going to be a fascinating animal for me today too as well. But I want to learn about you. I want to know how you got started. Let's go back in time. Obviously you're Australian, so you grew up there. What part of Australia you grew up at? And let's just go from there and figure out where we're going.
Yeah, so I actually grew up on the coast in a town called Port Macquarie, a lovely beach town. And yeah, I think that's where my love for animals started. You know, we had koalas kind of in our backyard as a kid growing up. So I guess that's kind of where my fascination with animals and science began. Yeah.
So where is that? Is that a west or east?
So if you think about Sydney in Australia, it's about
Right.
4 hours north of Sydney on the coast. So mid-north coast.
Okay, so if I'm thinking there, where is Kangaroo Island? Kangaroo Island, according around there.
Kangaroo Island is in South Australia, so much further south, down the bottom. Yeah.
Yeah, an old girlfriend of mine is. I told you I love Australia. An old girlfriend of mine is from Kangaroo Island.
Yeah, cool. Very cool place.
I've gone up north, and of course, I've done a little bit of surfing over there as well. So I love Australia. Like I said, I've never met an Australian I didn't like. So we're gonna have a good time.
Yeah. Oh, it's a good place.
Were you a beach person too, or just animal life, or what?
Yeah, beach. Loved the beach growing up. You know, as teenagers, we were always down there, jumping off the rocks, jumping in the blowholes, having a good time. So
Yeah.
moving into the river space now is a bit strange to me. I'm definitely, definitely a coast girl.
You know what's funny is I love fresh water too, but I grew up in Southern California. I mean, I grew up all over the place, but I always tell people I grew up in Southern California, and you may have actually know a little bit about it because there's tons of sea life. So I live in south of, well, just south of the airport in Los Angeles. It was called Palos Verdes, and it was all these tide pools and I mean, it was as a kid, it was just this heaven, like it was this magical mystery world of all the sea urchins and
Yeah.
sea cucumbers and all the crabs and all that kind of stuff too, and sea kelp and it was just this crazy place. Every time you went there was something different. It was really cool.
Yeah, the rock pool is so fun, as you said, every time you look in there, you find something different. Definitely fascinating.
It's so cool. So, anyways, as a kid, you're growing up there and you were an animal person. So, early on, did you know that you wanted to study animals? Did you know that?
I think I always wanted to work with animals, but I wasn't really sure like what opportunities were available and what that would actually look like.
Hmm.
So I was kind of thinking along the lines of doing something like zookeeping, just to keep that animal connection. But yeah, it wasn't until kind of later on in my senior years where I started to really like science and thought, well, maybe I'll go down that path and I can, pair up animals and science together.
Well, first off, not only do I know you like science, but it's funny because when I was doing my homework for this, you were an honor student in school too. You're not exactly a dummy, so I know that. Yeah, when I read that, I go, "Uh oh, she's gonna know big words. So I'm not gonna know what they mean or anything." It's pretty cool. And then you got your doctorate and all that kind of stuff too. So you're in school, and were you where you are now? What school did you end up going to?
So in high school in Port Macquarie, and then I moved to Sydney. I went to the University of New South Wales, where I did my undergrad and then my honours and then my doctorate, and I'm still working there now. So it's been a long journey there at UNSW for me.
Well, you stayed there. It's funny what because I told you I played rugby. So not only did when I was there for the World Cup, but I also used to play teams. And I think is it Sydney University that's got the big rugby pitch? Is that what it is? I can't remember.
Yeah, it might be. Yep.
Yeah, well, I went there for the beer, but anyways,
Yeah.
and those big fat balls. Anyway, so you stay there, and then walk me through your journey and the direction, and obviously we can get to these really crazy cool animals.
Yeah, so for my undergrad, that was just a science degree. I actually started out thinking I wanted to do geology early on. Then I took a few subjects on rocks and thought, yeah, no, that's definitely not for me. Back on the animal path. I did a few really hands-on conservation subjects in kind of the last year of my undergrad, and that kind of solidified to me that that was really the space I wanted to be working in. I loved going out in the field. I loved, catching animals, handling them, and working in the conservation space. So that led me to do like my 1 year's honours degree. Then once I finished that, it was like I was pretty done with uni. I thought I'm leaving. I'm never studying again. Classic. But then yeah, there was a PhD project offered on platypus. I thought it sounded really cool. I may as well just put my hat in the ring for it, and unexpectedly was offered that PhD project, and so took it up. And yeah, the journey with platypuses kind of began there, and here we are still. So yeah.
It's awesome. I first of all, they're such a weird but really cool animal, and I want to get into all that. But I was thinking about too is what's interesting. Obviously conservation has always been important, but I don't think it's more important. It's never been more important than it has been in the last decade in particular. And what a great direction to go to. And I want to get into that towards the end when we can talk about all the different things in that. And I know that's part of your passion, but it's more and more important every day with all the things that are going on in the world across the board. You know, forget climate change, but of course that's a big one, but just urban sprawl and all the other things that go along with that too. So it's such a very strategic move on your part.
Yeah, yeah, no, definitely. It's definitely important. At the moment, it feels like, as you said, more than ever. So,
Well, it's just crazy, and I want to. I have some other questions I want to ask about that, but let's hold off to that. Let's talk about platypus. Let's start off. If anybody that's listening that doesn't know what they look like, as soon as they see a picture, they do, and at some point in their life, they have. But most people don't know much about them at all. So I know there's all the basics. I'll let you do that. I mean, I could ask the same old questions. You probably have been asked a million times plus, but just for the audience out there, kind of let's walk through it, and then I've got a gazillion questions for you. Some are going to be obscure, but I've got the questions for you. So whatever direction you want to go.
The platypus, yeah. Again, like everyone's always just so fascinated by this animal. So not only in its morphology, but also its evolution. It's characteristically known as the duck-billed platypus here in Australia. It looks like a duck, but interestingly enough, the bill of a platypus is very different to what people expect. So it's actually nothing like a duck at all. It's very soft, it's very malleable, and that's because it's their primary organ for detecting their food. So it's actually full of electroreceptors and then mechanoreceptors, which means the platypus will actually dive under the water and it's relying purely on its bill to find its prey. So the little water bugs that are kind of distributed in the water column or on the bottom are emitting these like electrical signals that the bill will then detect. So the platypus is kind of underwater, it's got its eyes and ears closed, and it's really using that bill just to find that prey.
So I got a question about that. And by the way, I interrupt all the time. I apologize now. I'm not going to apologize anymore. I'm just rude. So one of the things that when I was reading about that is that I know they close their ears, their eyes, and all that kind of stuff. But when they're using their electro sensors, for my term, is it similar to what dolphins are using for like sonic waves? Are they doing similar to that? I kept thinking, God, it sounds so similar, but I don't know if that is or isn't.
Yeah, yeah. So they're not sending out any signals with their bill like we see in other animals. They're purely relying on the movement of their prey to then be detected by their bill. So it's a little bit different to some other species. But yeah, very sensitive, but they do, yeah, they are just relying on detecting the movement of other animals within the water column.
And you'd mentioned this, you're getting all the water bugs. And one of the things I read was, do they have teeth? It sounded like the one thing I read, they kind of grind their stuff, but it's not really teeth.
Yeah, so adult platypuses, no, they don't have any teeth. They've got, yeah, like what's called a keratin grinding pad. So kind of within the mouth of the platypus, they have these two kind of grooved plates that run inside the mouth. And so they'll go down, they'll detect their prey, they'll kind of bring it into their bill. And then when they come to the surface, you'll see they're kind of grinding the top and the bottom of their bill together. And that's when they're using these kind of keratinized plates to really mush those invertebrates into almost a paste.
Oh wow, that's crazy. Okay, so we keep going. There's so many things.
Yes, yeah. So that's the
I
bill.
told you I'm like a kid in a candy shop.
So yeah, platypuses, they're semi-aquatic, so they live in rivers. They mostly spend their time in rivers. That's where, they need to be in water to find their food. They rely on the water for this electroreception. They need to be in the water for mating. But when they're not foraging in rivers, they do kind of rest in the riverbanks. So they are highly specialized swimmers. So the front feet of a platypus are very large. They're webbed. They've got this nice webbing between the feet that really allows them to propel through the water. They're mainly only using their front feet when they're swimming. So it's very specialized for them. And then the feet also, they can actually fold back that webbing, which will then expose these nails, which is how they dig these burrows. So they'll go to the edge, they'll fold their webbing back, they'll use these nails to kind of carve away these really intricate burrows that go into the riverbank.
Well, you know what I'm visualizing. For you guys that are listening. We get to see each other when we're talking, but I'm kind of visualizing when they've got their webs and they fold it in. It's like Edward Scissorhands has got these things in there. It's kind of how you're showing
almost like a Wolverine maneuver.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I guess Wolverine would be better for you with Hugh Jackman being from down there.
Yeah.
But it was funny. That was one of the questions I was going to ask you because I had read about that. It's saying they were really webbed in the front, but then when they get on land, they fold it in. And you showing me visually makes a lot more sense to me now. So that's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So the front feet, yeah, like I said, highly specialized for swimming. Their fur is incredible. So it's one of the densest furs of any animal on the planet. They've got a really nice intuitive layer, which means that they can obviously spend, hours upon hours in the water and also in water that's freezing or approaching freezing. So they're very good at thermoregulating using this fur. The fur is just like it's so soft that when Europeans arrived in Australia, they're actually hunted extensively for this fur to
Of
make
course.
coats, to make hats, to make slippers, because it's waterproof and it's incredibly soft. If you ever get the opportunity to pat a platypus, well, that's a mouthful, then yeah, it's very special.
I'm not going to try that because I'll never make that through. But I want one of the things that made me think of them too. Is it similar to the fur of a sea otter?
Yeah, yeah. So very dense. I have no experience with sea otters, obviously. But yeah, I have been told like very similar in terms of like the thickness and the waterproofness of the fur.
Yeah, waterproofness, temperature. They can stay in the water longer. You know what also has really good. The, like remember I told you my pup facts. I've got all the pup facts, but Airedales. Their hair is built for water, and also they keep them warm, and they can stay in the water longer. That's a dog, but I mean, still, it's interesting how they evolve.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and so then for male platypuses, they have the venomous spur. So on the hind ankles of the male, they have a kind of a curved spur that can be 1 to 2 centimeters long, which delivers a venom, which is said to be the most excruciatingly painful experience known to man. There's no anti-venom. Morphine has no effect. You would probably immediately pass out from the pain, and then the pain can last months, if not years. So,
I wanted to ask you if you. I was hoping you've been spurred by them. I really was hoping because I was going to ask you because I'd read about that, and it's mainly comes out when they're mating, right? Is that the deal?
yeah, so no, I have not been spurred. We're pretty careful when we're handling them to try and stay clear of that.
Yeah, I would be.
And yeah, it is for the males. We see an increase in the venom production during the breeding months. And so it's used during male-male combat. They're fighting each other for territory, they're fighting each other for mates and resources. Obviously, it doesn't have the same impact on platypuses as it does on humans. That would be quite
Well,
detrimental
obviously.
to them as a species. Yeah. But yeah, certainly we're conscious of that when we're doing any handling and really trying to steer clear of that venom. Not an experience I want to have.
Okay, hold on. So I'm trying to visualize because I read it, and I've only seen pictures of it. I may have seen one at the zoo or something, but I don't think I have. But let's talk about size. There's all kinds of other characteristics, but can we talk about size? What I read, I thought they were bigger than what I read. So tell me about that.
Yeah, I think this is one of the biggest misconceptions about platypus. Everyone always says they're bigger than, that they think they're bigger than they are. And I think
Right.
that maybe is like coming back to the otters
Yeah.
situation. Like everyone expects them to be that sort of size. But no, like, yeah, typically the males will reach between 1.5 and 2.5 kilos. And then they'll be about 50 to 60 centimeters. So, they're not massive. The females can be anywhere between 900 grams and probably 1.5 kilos, maybe a bit more depending on where you go.
Right.
And between, yeah, 40, 50 centimeters or so. But that also varies across the range. So in Northern Australia, we've got like tiny little platypuses. And then when you come down to Tassie, they're bigger. So some of the males there can get up to about 3 kilograms.
Yeah, and for you guys who listen, one of the things that I read too, you can only find, unless you're in the zoo, you can only find platypus either in Australia or Tas. So, and that's it. And I didn't know that.
That's it, yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, endemic to Australia and specifically the East Coast. So primarily on kind of the eastern seaboard, and then they just get progressively less abundant as we head west.
But they're inland, so they're in fresh water. They're not in salt water. That's another thing. So are they similar to beavers?
Yeah, so only fresh water. I don't know a huge amount about beavers, if I'm going to be honest. Obviously, we don't have any beavers here in Australia. But yeah, they don't love the salt. They can tolerate it for small periods of times, but then they're definitely heading back into that freshwater streams.
Just a little trivia for you and for the people who are listening to. The university that I went to was Oregon State, and our mascot was the beaver. So I was a beaver. I can't tell you anything about them, but I was a beaver.
For real, 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 for real.
And we'll be right back.
As a pet lover, did you know your pet can benefit from the incredible healing power of stem cell therapy? Prep Therapy offers a groundbreaking solution taken right from your pet's own blood. Say goodbye to joint pain, arthritis, kidney and liver conditions, and more. They'll experience faster recovery, increased vitality, and extended quality of life without the need for surgery or harmful drugs. Put the wag back in their tail and discover Prep Therapy today at prepvet.com. Save 10% with promo code FurRealPodcast, covered by most pet insurance.
Okay, so keep going, because there's so many other things about these guys that are just, it's really fascinating. I mean, in so many ways. So
Yeah.
more characteristics.
So they're a monotreme. They're a monotreme, which means they lay eggs. So there's only kind of two. There's the echidnas and then there's platypus. So there are only monotremes. We've got 5 species of echidna and just 1 species of platypus. So it's very unique in terms of its lineage, and obviously this egg-laying trait. So eggs, again, unexpected. When they lay these eggs, the eggs are tiny, like, maybe like a Mentos size, if that's a good reference.
Jelly bean.
Yeah, like someone I was talking to the other day, we were describing it as like a big spider egg almost. Like they're sure. Tiny and they're very rubbery. They're not like, they're not like a chicken egg. It's kind of what people expect when you say egg laying. And so the platypuses, they will, as I was talking about before, use their claws. They're going to dig these burrows. The egg-laying burrows are different to just a normal burrow that they use for overnight resting. These egg-laying burrows, they can build like 30 meters into the riverbank. They'll have different chambers. They'll have dead ends, and then they'll get to this section where they'll do the nesting chamber. And so the female is going to excavate that. And then she's going to go out and she's going to collect a whole heap of vegetation with her tail, so scooping it under her tail, dragging it back into that nesting chamber, constructing a little nest, and that's where she's going to lay between 1 and 3 of these tiny little eggs in her nesting burrow.
How long's her gestation period?
It's very short, less than 2 weeks. Then the eggs are going to hatch in there, and then mum's going to be in there. Like, obviously, when they hatch, they're very primitive, tiny, like, as you said before, jelly bean, pink, furless. Mum's going to be in there pretty much flat out, providing milk for the babies. And even that, I should touch on, is another weird trait. So they don't have any nipples. They're kind of just excreting this milk through their skin, which, again, is very strange.
Right.
And the mum will kind of do that for a few months until the young kind of emerges, maybe 3 to 4 months after hatching. And the animal will be at about 70% of its body weight. So it's kind of out the door, mum changes the locks, and it's on its own for good then.
So how big, how big are what do they call the babies? Pups or something like that?
So we have a term called puggles, which is not like technically true, but it is becoming more and more user accepted. So I go with puggle. I think it's cute. People love
puggle. I like puggle.
Yeah,
that's cute.
Yeah, so the puggles come out. Like I said, about 70-80% of adult weight. So if we catch a juvenile when it's first coming out, it might be between 400 and 500 grams, 30 centimeters or so. But yeah, super cute. Very, very cute to see them when they're first emerging.
I'm trying to convert that into American.
Oh, sorry.
So it's going to be...
I can't help you there.
About a pound maybe, or a little bit more than a pound, and probably about 9 inches or something like that. I think that's what that would work out to be, roughly. And for you guys that are listening, everybody's going to be sending me emails. You're so wrong. I'm guessing. Anyways, okay. So they're pretty big when they leave the home.
Yeah.
When you're out, and that's usually after how many, like 7 or 8 months or something like that?
3 to 4 months. So it's quite amazing. So they come, from this jelly bean size into almost like a fully grown adult in just a couple of months. And then they leave the burrow and they're on their way. Mum doesn't really, as far as we know, Mum doesn't really provide any help once they're out on their own.
That's another question. Do you think I have a lot of questions? Anyways, um, I was one of the things I read was that they're solitary. So I guess they only really hang out to each other when they're mating, and then the mothers are only hanging out with their babies until they're just doing it and raising the kids and saying, "Oh, leave me alone. I'm going to go do my own thing now."
Yeah, so I guess all our research has kind of suggested that platypus are solitary. But in saying that, we don't know a huge amount about some of these things. Like, there's some evidence from captivity that maybe the mothers provide a bit more maternal care than we first thought.
Hmm.
But whether that translates into the wild, we don't know. We've always kind of thought that they don't burrow share, that they're very solitary. But more and more with some of our radio tracking studies, we are seeing multiple platypuses using the same burrow or using the same burrow after each other. So there does appear to be some sort of, whether they're communicating or whatever reason they're doing that sort of behavior. But I think the more we learn, perhaps they're not quite as solitary as we once thought.
So there's more of a community. So what's the male's job? Their job is just to procreate, and that's it.
Pretty much, yeah. Yep.
That sounds like a typical American man to me. The lazy guys that we are.
No comment.
Yeah. Oh no, I said it. You didn't have to say anything. So it could be maybe a typical Aussie too. I don't know. But anyways, um,
Yep.
so I know that they have 1 to 3 eggs. Do typic? I know, like I think it's the Tassies, the devils, that they kind of fight, and they have like a one that lives, and because they're really really tiny. And then the weak ones don't really survive. They because I think they have two nipples and they have maybe three babies, and one just kind of weans off of the thing or some kind of crazy thing like that. Is that similar with these guys, or do they have a litter or whatever they call it of two, one, two, or three?
Yeah, we think normally 1 to 3, but probably most often two eggs a leg.
Hmm.
As far as we know, there's no like they're not fighting each other. But again, like it's a very hard thing to study. Obviously, this is happening underground inside a burrow, so
Right.
we really have a lot of the insights are really limited into some of these things. But we do see, like in captivity, again, rare for them to breed, but when they do, that two young can emerge successfully. So we expect that that's similar in the wild.
So how exciting is that for you, though? I mean, you're studying an animal that really there's a lot of information that's not out there yet. That's have you discovered anything in your 10 years of doing this stuff that wasn't out there?
Yeah, I think in the last decade, we've come a long way in platypus research. When
Uh huh.
our research group first started, there was definitely much less happening. We had a platypus conference back in 2016 that was kind of like a half day event. There was a lot of researchers from that started, way back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s that were still around researching platypus. But we also had a conference just last month, and there was 100 people there. We had 60 presenters that were doing all sorts of interesting studies on platypus, and the technology as well for things like tracking and studying these animals has come so far in the last decade. So I think we're really progressing in our understanding of the species. But I always have this joke where I say to people, like, the more I learn about this species, the less I feel I know. Like, it's just,
Yeah.
you find out something that doesn't align with what you previously thought. So there is a bit of that. But yeah, I think we're definitely progressing in this space.
So are you guys using a lot of DNA stuff as well? Because everybody I talk to now, because DNA has just exploded like in the last 10 years when there were just so many different markers. Now there's so many more, and they're just learning so many other things. Are you guys doing a lot of that?
Yeah, we do a lot of environmental DNA work. So we go out and we take a sample of water
Uh
and
huh.
send that to the lab, and they send back, every single species that is detected. So that's been a really incredible tool for platypus because obviously, they're very cryptic. Like a lot of Australians have not seen a platypus before. They come out at night, they live in rivers, they're very hard to spot. And so the eDNA has been amazing because you can go and take a water sample and you can say, oh, we actually do have platypuses here. And so
Oh.
it's amazing for understanding kind of where they're living. But if you want any details about how many are there, how healthy they are, if you need samples for genetics, you really have to do more of the live trapping, actually go out catch these animals, collect the samples. So eDNA definitely has an amazing place, but yeah, it needs to be supplemented.
So I had read about you. I know all about you now. Anyways, I'd read about you. You've captured 450 or so platypus. So you're one of the unique Aussies that's actually seen a bunch of them. But when you get them, and tell me the number when I get done with my random thought. But when you get them, are you microchipping them? Are you tagging them? Are you RFD? Or what are you doing to I guess advance what you guys are doing?
Yeah, so we do. Our team does a huge amount of field work. So it's very intensive to capture platypuses. Like I said, they're nocturnal, they live in rivers. It's not an easy task, but we've been at it for about a decade now. I think we're up to about 600 captures, which is like it's amazing. And then every animal that we capture, we have like a standard protocol that we implement. So for us, we actually do in-field anesthesia. The reasoning for that is that platypuses, they're a wild animal, so we really want to minimize any stress that we're causing to these animals when we're taking these samples.
Right.
And so when they're asleep, we get the opportunity to take a huge number of samples that we wouldn't be able to do when they're awake. And obviously they have this venomous spur as well. So for us, it's easier to handle. We're not kind of at risk of getting spurred while we're kind of poking and prodding.
Yeah, sure.
So the samples that we take are to look at health, they look at genetics. We take fur samples and stuff to look at diet, but then also, yes, a microchip. So if we recapture that animal, we can scan it. We know exactly who it was, when we last caught it. And then depending on the project that we're doing, we do also have a number of different tracking devices that we can use.
That's what I was going to ask, tracking, yeah.
Yeah. So sometimes we'll do, most of them is like you just glue them on externally, some super glue. You shave a little patch of fur. We can glue a radio transmitter, which means that we actually have to go out with an antenna and we'll hear the platypus pinging and we can kind of locate exactly where it is in the burrow. Or we can use acoustics. So that will also be pinging, but that relies on water and it relies on having kind of receivers sitting in the water. So when the platypus swims past, it's pinging off those receivers, and then we can go and download the data that way.
So do they keep their territories? Are they very big, or are they? I'm assuming they're probably in a small territory.
It depends, and again, this is why I say the more we learn, like the less I know. But it really depends on the river system. So it's going to depend on what size river, the flow of the river, how is there vegetation, how many burrows can they make, how much food is there, what's the productivity, how many other platypuses are there. So if you've got a stream with just a few platypuses, maybe they're occupying larger territories, but if you've got really high densities, maybe they're having like a lot more overlap happening within those areas. So on some rivers we do see, males will occupy a few kilometers in the breeding season and kind of defend that and have those females. But then in other systems where we have much higher densities, you will get males kind of overlapping within the same kind of stretch of pool. So it does depend, but yeah, they can certainly occupy a few kilometers for sure.
Who are their predators? What animal is going after them? Is it the gators or what is it?
Crocodiles aren't really a problem. So platypus, they extend all the way up to Queensland, but their range kind of ends as crocodiles start. So we don't really know if that's because they can't coexist. Obviously, if you're a platypus, you're probably a nice, tasty meal for a crocodile. So perhaps that's
appetizer.
Yeah, maybe that's kind of a limiting factor for their range there. But we do have problems here with foxes, so introduced red fox in Australia. And you might think, well, how is that a problem for an animal that lives in the water? But it becomes a problem here when we get drying. So the rivers kind of start drying out. Platypuses start making more overland movements to try and find more water. And we do see during droughts that they do get a bit hammered by those foxes. We suspect it's probably similar for cats, but we don't have a huge amount we don't have any evidence for it.
Right.
And so, yeah, that's kind of the main predators that we're concerned about for platies.
I would have never thought fox. That's interesting. I could see something in the water, but that's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
For real, for real, for real.
And we'll be right back.
As a pet lover, did you know your pet can benefit from the incredible healing power of stem cell therapy? PrEP Therapy offers a groundbreaking solution taken right from your pet's own blood. Say goodbye to joint pain, arthritis, kidney and liver conditions, and more. They'll experience faster recovery, increased vitality, and extended quality of life without the need for surgery or harmful drugs. Put the wag back in their tail and discover PrEP Therapy today at PrepVet.com. Save 10% with promo code FurRealPodcast, covered by most pet insurance.
Talk about the UV thing where you can see them at nighttime, and so this I'm going to just let it go. You talk about it because I read it, but I want you to say it.
Yeah, so a few years ago, a paper came out that said platypuses glow under UV light. So obviously we immediately went out and bought a UV torch, took that out in the field with us, and yeah, it's very cool. You shine the UV light, you get like some nice colorations on the platypus. You might actually know more than me about what the reasoning is for it, because everyone asks me and I say
there's nothing out there for it. Nobody knows.
Yeah, that's my answer. And we do see this trait in other marsupials in Australia. It's not unique to just platypuses.
I didn't know that.
So whether it's something that's been retained, further back in the phylogeny, I'm not sure. But yeah, it's another fun little feature that we certainly had a good time with the light in the field. But yeah, very cool.
Have they checked the muggles to see if they glow too? Do the muggles glow?
I don't know.
That's something you need to do. So you have to tell me when you do it. I want to hear about that.
Yeah.
What I was thinking about when I was reading this thing, because they've been around. What's amazing is how long they've been around. They've been around for over 100 million years. Is that the time?
Yeah.
Again, this is not me knowing. I'm just saying that's a big number. Is that when dinosaurs were around? Were they around during dinosaur time?
Yeah. Yeah. So evolution is. I'll say that to start with. Evolution is not my forte, but yes, they have been around for a long, long time. Certainly, the ancestral forms of platypuses and monotremes have been around, 200 million years or something crazy. So they've been in Australia and South America and Antarctica for, hundreds of millions of years, which is just crazy to think that they were here when dinosaurs were here and they're still existing here in Australia. So like I said, not only is it just their morphology, but also, their evolutionary history is just fascinating.
Well, what's fascinating just about Australia itself, you guys have such a unique, diverse animal world there that, it's unique to, it's not in a lot of other places. The Tassies and a lot of other things too. They're, quokkas and all those. They're all, I think the blue penguins, the miniature blue penguins go down to New Zealand. But other than that, you guys don't have you guys got a lot more things than we do, really.
Yeah. We're very lucky. We have a lot of unique mammals.
So, let's talk about your specialty aside from being this crazy animal that you know about, but let's talk about conservation with them. What's going on? I was thinking one of the things I read about, because you guys have had the droughts and stuff like that too. And I know you guys had those fires, what was it, 2 or 3 years ago? Did that affect them as well? Because that's not, when I was digging around, nothing came up about that, but it certainly came up about dams and things like that. So let's talk about that. And I'm curious about how because the fire affected everything from koalas to across the board, but I didn't know if it affected them as well.
Yeah, so here in Australia, we had now what's called the Black Summer bushfires in the summer of 2019 into 2020. Which just burnt an insane amount of the East Coast. And it really coincided with the distribution of platypus and, a lot of, as you said, koalas, a lot of other species here. So it was, a horrible time for wildlife here in Australia. And we know the statistics, it was billions of animals were lost during these fires. The issue with platypus is that, they live in these burrows and they live in the rivers. So I think when people think about fire and flames, they think, oh, well, they just go underwater or just go into their burrow and it's no problem. And that's true to an extent. We never had the capacity to track platypuses during a bushfire to see exactly what happens. But the issue that we have is like the secondary impacts of these bushfires. So after these fires, we had a huge amount of rain in Australia. We went from a period of really significant drought and fire into intense rainfall, and it occurred quite quickly after the fires. And so all the vegetation's burnt. There's no, there's nothing on the ground. So we had a situation then where all this ash, all this debris washed into the rivers. And so the rivers were smothered, they were full of ash. Fish were dying. Obviously, the macroinvertebrate bugs that platypus depend on for survival were impacted. And so we suspect that that's kind of the mechanism by which platypus are impacted by these events, rather than, directly being burnt by the flames. It's kind of these secondary fire impacts. But we don't know to what extent that had an impact. There's evidence in some areas through the eDNA I was talking about that platypus were there before the fires and now they're no longer found there. But again, it's just a super hard thing to study on an incredibly elusive species. So,
Right.
yeah, we expect it's impacting them as it is other animals, but to what extent, we still don't know.
Okay, so but let's go into your specialty and talk about what's happening in the world of platypus. I know they're not quite endangered, but they're threatened. I've read that on the IUCN Red List and all that. So, what's causing that? We all know anybody that has half a brain that's willing to not to be political, there's climate change. The bottom line. And if for you guys listening, I'm sorry, but I know there's climate change. It's just I've talked to too many people and too many things are affected. So let's talk about that, and let's talk about us as humans, that what we're causing and what we can do to rectify that.
Yeah. Yeah, so platypuses, they're listed as near threatened by the IUCN. So that's kind of, they're almost vulnerable. There's evidence to suggest that they're declining. But for a species this elusive, that's hard to get data for, it's really hard to kind of make a strong case that they should be listed as a threatened species. We expect in some areas that they've been lost from some areas. We know that they're declining in some areas. So, we're trying to constantly put forward the case that this should be a threatened species, but it's just about generating enough data to actually prove that. And, there's the obvious reasons for these declines. You were talking earlier about, there's the evidence for impact of dams. So that seems like an obvious one, but again, that was a lot of our work kind of in the last decade has been just trying to prove what impact dams actually have. So obviously, if you're an animal that lives in a river and you're trying to get somewhere and there's a big barrier in front of you, shock horror, like you can't pass it. So, we see impacts of fragmentation, you get localized, isolated populations. But then there's also how the dam is managed. So, we extract a lot of water here in Australia for agricultural purposes.
Sure.
And for drinking water. We need water for food, we need water for humans. But yeah, that does often come at the expense of our rivers. And so the way that the rivers are managed, sometimes we have no flows, sometimes we have flows during the wrong season. They impact with the breeding of the platypuses. We have flows of the wrong temperatures, which impacts the water bugs. So there's a whole lot of issues associated with river regulation that have impacted platypuses a lot in the past, and they will continue to impact them into the future, as more and more people populate our cities here in Australia. So yeah, that's a huge concern. And there's a lot of other threatening processes driving. I don't know how many you want to talk about, but we can go into them if you like.
This is your journey. Remember, I told you, you're the chef. I'm just a waiter.
Yeah. So dams and water extraction, I think, is one of our biggest concerns. But then there's a lot of impacts that stem from that as well. So I talked a bit before about the riparian vegetation. So the trees along riverbanks are incredibly important for an animal that has to build its burrows in these banks, because you can imagine if you get rid of the trees, you've no longer got the roots that are holding that soil together. And so a platypus will come, it will try to dig its burrow, and there's just no structural stability there. So, it can't burrow, it can't build its nesting burrow. So that's a big problem. And then once you remove those trees and you pair it with things like altered hydrology from dams, you might get a huge amount of water coming down. There's no trees then to hold the bank together, so you start getting erosion, and the bank kind of erodes away. And then that sediment also needs to go somewhere, so it often ends up in the nice deep pools where platypuses like to forage, and so those pools become shallower. They have less habitat, and then you get a drought, and those pools dry out much faster. So unfortunately for the platypus, every one of these threats that we're talking about is kind of really interlinked and really compounding, which is, yeah, that's probably the biggest problem. It's almost, we like to say, a death by 1,000 cuts, because they are very resilient, but as soon as you start piling and piling all these different threats on top of each other, that's where we see the biggest impacts for the species.
So when we had talked, the good thing is, if people are more aware, is that it's not too late. So what are the things that we can change that isn't major for, whatever they have to have a dam because of water, because they're, whatever they're doing. I'm probably to get that fresh water so you can swallow that Vegemite stuff. But other than that, um, what can you guys do to really control this? So you got it right now. The timing's perfect to do it, because at some point it becomes too late.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess, and one thing I didn't touch on then was drought. That's like our biggest concern. Obviously, this species needs water. So without water, we have no platypuses. But drought is a huge issue to tackle. As you said, climate change is happening. We're seeing here in Australia the increased frequency and intensity of droughts is just, it's massive. So our work is now kind of moving into the space of looking at how platypuses respond to drought, what we can actually do about it, and working a lot with like these dam managers to try and make sure we're providing the best conditions for platypuses in these rivers so that they can actually sustain through these periods. So, it's talking about delivering environmental water so that we're not completely drying out the river section, or changing the timing of the flow so that, platypuses can actually survive through these periods. It's working with farmers to try and fence off cattle so that we can have, that riparian vegetation come back and provide some stability. So all those sorts of things are things that we're really trying to work on now, because as you said, like the platypus, it's near threatened. It's not at risk of going extinct tomorrow. There's certainly strongholds still occurring right across its range. But I think here in Australia, a lot of the time, we only worry about species once they're, classified as
Too late.
critically
Yeah.
endangered. And that is always seems to me to be a situation where, we're trying to repair what we've lost. And a lot of the time it isn't possible. So we're in a really good position for platypus that if we do kind of make some of these management changes now, that I'm hopeful that we can kind of change that trajectory and hopefully have a positive future for them.
So I have a question, because I know you were involved and was successful of relocating them to that national park there by Sydney, and it was successful, and the numbers are up. Is that, and we can talk a little bit about that, but is that one of the solutions, maybe, if you're in an area that, because as I, at least from my layman's view, is the weather's changing, so the patterns are different in different areas, where other areas may be more wet and don't have the same drought areas and things like that. Is that one of the solutions too, if you have to do that?
Yeah, so we did do the reintroduction to Royal National Park, just south of Sydney. But yeah, you're correct. The reasoning behind that was because I think a lot of our research over the past decade has been proving the obvious. Yes, dams are bad. Yes, climate change is bad. We have all these threats. But for us, we kind of got to a point where it's like, well, we can keep on doing research to say what's bad, but like, what can we actually do about this? Like, how are we going to manage this going forward? How do we make on ground change? And so the reintroduction to Royal was kind of a case of, it was a great project to reintroduce a platypus to an area that had been lost, but for us it was also more about learning, like, can we actually take this animal and put it somewhere else and have it establish, if we need to do that in the future when a river goes dry, can we actually move them somewhere else to
Right,
prove that they can successfully establish, and what do they need to establish, and what do we need as a team of researchers and
right.
collaborators to actually make that happen? So that was kind of the premise for doing that initially.
Well, what's so cool about it, what I read, which you haven't said yet, you should be patting yourself on the back because they hadn't been there for 50 years.
Yeah, we suspect somewhere between 20 and 50 years since they were lost there.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so it was a very exciting project for us. It was very stressful, to be honest. It was like an experiment. Like, in all
Oh, I'll
honesty,
bet.
yeah, we weren't sure were they going to reestablish there. And obviously, we had a connection to all the animals. We gave them names. We knew who they were. So it was
Oh,
very stressful to put them there and hope that things went well. But yeah, over the moon that that project's going well. We had breeding happening within the first year of reintroducing them, which is well beyond our expectations. So it's been an amazing story there in the
man,
Royal.
that's exciting. That's really, really cool. Okay, so I've got a couple other things before we get done. So I was like finding like old like folk tales and myths and stuff. So I was reading some of the First Nation stuff, and I'm sure you probably know these ones, but I've got it in front of me because I didn't want to forget any of them. The Child of Two Worlds. Do you know that one?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, I got to read this to you. It's one of the best things ever. It's one of the best known stories of a female duck who fell in love with a water rat. Their offspring became a platypus. The birds claimed it belonged to them because it had of its bill, while the mammals claimed it because of his fur. The platypus chose neither, and they said, we like you both, but we're going to do our own thing. So it's interpreted as a lesson of identity, belonging, and accepting differences. I think it's like the best story ever. It's one of the cool ones.
Yeah.
And then the other one was the modern myth is that God had leftover parts and he made a platypus. Do you know that one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense though.
There's a bunch of them that I'll email them to you if you want, just for grins and giggles, grins and muggles,
Yeah, I would love that.
grins and muggles. But anyways, I just thought it was really interesting. I'm always fascinated by the First Nations, anyways, for a variety of reasons. And they always have. I like mythical, crazy little stuff that it's. I believe in magic, so I kind of wanted the magical ideas and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Kind of makes you feel better. So before we get to the joke that I know that you decide you're not going to tell, I wanted to, for people, if people want to find out about you, any of the stuff you've done, social media. I know we're friends now recently on the conservation thing and all that. Can you let everybody know? By the way, if you're listening, I say this all the time, it's in the description, but here it is for you guys, just so you can look and make sure you follow, donate, because I guarantee you there's not a scientist in the world that doesn't need money. So go on and go ahead, whatever you can point everybody to, websites, whatever, books, whatever you want to talk about.
Yeah, so yeah, we're on all the social medias. Everyone loves platypuses. It's amazing to share our work. I love engaging with an international audience. So yeah, we're on Instagram. If you look up Platypus Conservation Initiative or platypus_CI, you'll find us there. Yeah, same for Facebook. And we do also have a website. And yeah, if people want to donate, would love to have people involved. Research is expensive. We're constantly looking for funding to research this amazing animal. So yeah, check out our page and hopefully you find some fun videos of platypuses on there as well.
Yeah, of course you will. And then, as I said, just go to the description, and I guarantee you guys will be really excited to see that because I'm excited like a little baby boy, little muggle. I'm a little muggle. Anyways, so here's my joke, but I've got a second one I'm going to tell you based on something you said, just an old joke that I have, but I'm going to convert it into a platypus one. So, why do you never tell jokes in the barn?
Why?
I almost hate saying it because pigs always squeal. I know. I told you. Anyways, by the way, you guys listening, I forgot to say this. As I always say, if you want to be on the show, you want grandkids on or your nieces, nephews, whatever, if you email me at mkyle@forrealpodcast.com, I get back to everybody. And if you got, by the way, if you got a great subject too, that's great too. But if you've got a better joke and you want to tell it, trust me, everybody wants somebody else to tell the joke than mine. But here's a joke, an old joke I have that's relative to your saying. So what did the platypus say when it swam into a wall?
What?
Damn.
I should have got that actually.
Oh, you didn't get the first one? They were going to tell your secret. Anyway.
I'll be using that one. Thank you.
Well, that's a good one to use. That's an easy one. But
Yeah.
the one I know is, what does the fish say when it swam in the wall? But I'm thinking, oh, that's perfectly for that one. We're talking about dams.
Nice.
Anyway, Tahneal, this is such a treat for me. I know for everybody listening, they're going to be really glad to do that. And I'm always so happy to meet new people. You're now stuck with me, but I so appreciate you for being on the show. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really fun.
Well, it's always fun for me. And then for everybody else that's listening, as I always say, without you guys, I don't get to get great guests like Tahneal. Again, email me if you guys have ideas of guests, because I'm always looking for new, cool people like her and whatever. But most importantly, really, truly, without you guys, it doesn't happen. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for listening. For real.
That concludes this episode of For Real with your host, Mark Kyle. For previous and future episodes of For Real, listen via all major podcast streaming sites.